Before we can move on to talk about inline styles and some dynamic styles, we first need to understand how JSX and JavaScript play together. We saw that in the middle of our JavaScript, we're able to return something that looks like HTML, but we've discovered is actually JSX. Well, what if I have a variable that I want to stick inside of my H1? Maybe, for example, I have a first name and a last name. And instead of saying hello world, I want to say hello Bob's a roll. Well, I might be tempted to say hello and then first name plus a space plus last name. But I'm assuming you can figure out exactly what's going to happen here. When I save this, it literally interprets every character that I typed as if it were the text inside of the H1, which is pretty much exactly what we should expect it to do. So how do we jump into JavaScript while we're in the middle of our JSX? They actually made it really simple. All we have to do is surround any JavaScript that we want to be interpreted with curly braces. And once I refresh this, you'll see that it actually interpreted everything inside of the curly braces as JavaScript. The way I like to think of this is we're looking at JavaScript, 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 and now we're in JSX land. Once we're in JSX land, which actually started with this less than symbol, everything will be treated as if it were regular HTML, meaning any text inside is going to be literally interpreted. However, as soon as we want to get back into JavaScript, we put a curly brace. And now we're back into JavaScript land. JavaScript, JavaScript, JavaScript. Closing curly brace tells me we want to leave JavaScript and go back into JSX. And you can do pretty complex JavaScript operations inside here. Since we've mostly converted over to the ES6 syntax, I'm actually going to change this to the string templating syntax of ES6, where I put backticks and then a $ curly brace surrounding any variables that I want to show up. Then I can just put a space itself, and that will be treated as a literal text space. Then a $ curly braces again, last name, and I save that, and you see we get the same result over in the browser. Because this is just regular JavaScript inside, pretty much anything that I could regularly do in JavaScript, I can do inside of these curly braces. Let's look at one really simple example. Maybe when it's morning, I want it to say good morning, and when it's night, I want it to say good night, without actually having to come in and change the code manually. Well, I can just do some simple JavaScript to set that up. I'm going to speed this up really quick, but we'll get a chance to explain it in a second. Here you can see one example where I've created a new date instance and simply put in my H1, it is currently about, and then in JavaScript, I got the hours and did a modulo 12 so that it would be in a 12-hour clock system. Alternatively, I could check the current hours for what time of day it is and set a string equal to either morning, afternoon, or night, which let's try that out right now. So here all I did was set a variable called time of day and did a simple if else to check what time of day it was. Then down here, I simply said good, jumped into JavaScript, and said time of day. When I refresh this, I get good night. because it's nighttime where I'm recording this. Hopefully you can start to see the possibilities that this brings, and we're going to see as the course moves on that this is actually really useful. We needed to see this right here simply so that in the next video when we talk about inline styling with the style property, the way that we have to do that will make a little bit more sense. Feel free to mess with this. There's some pretty fun things you can do. Once you're ready, let's move on.